Good morning to you and welcome to First Financial Biz Beat presented by the Business Courier. I'm Kyla Woods. In about 7 weeks, all the ballots will have been cast one way or another in this year's election. And new numbers from the Pew Research Center predict record turnout. That could spell trouble for local Republicans. On the front page centerpiece this week, the GOP is in a run for its life. The bluing of Hamilton County has been happening for years. Now the county GOP is the underdog. The Courier talked with more than a dozen local consultants, political operatives, elected officials, business leaders, and political observers in both parties for this story. Reporter Chris Wetterick joins editor Rob Dahlmeyer with what they had to say.
Thank you very much. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So why is this election so different from others locally?
Well, in the last two major elections in 2016 and 2018, the Republican at the top of the ticket, whether it was Donald Trump in 16 or Mike DeWine in 18, that person has run 10 points behind the Democratic nominee, which is extraordinary in Hamilton County history because the Republican Party dominated this county and really kind of had a political machine for so long. But that 10-point deficit means that local candidates, the candidates for county office and judge, they have a lot of room that they got a ravine they have to jump over because of that. Because nationally, the trends have shown that more and more people are voting straight party ticket. They're going all the way down their ballot, voting for either every Democrat or every Republican, with very, very few exceptions, 0.5%, 1%, whatever it happens to be, it's a small percentage. So that's a major thing for Republicans to have to overcome in this county. And it's really just happened in the last 8 years.
Yeah. So were the Democrats that you talked to for this story, they're bullish, correct? I mean, they really do believe that this is a new era.
Right. They have their own polling that shows that Joe Biden will probably win this county by at least 10 points, probably more. And they believe, they're doing everything that they can amidst the pandemic to get people to do that straight party voting, to vote all the way down the ballot. For instance, judges are not listed by their party on the ballot. There's just two names, and you don't know whether one's a Democrat or one's a Republican. So the Democrats are doing a lot of work to make sure that people who they think are their voters, quote unquote, will go all the way down the ballot and finish out those judge races so that they can really try to get control of that courthouse almost exclusively. Right now, they kind of, they've won a few of those races in the past. They want to win a majority of that court. And, they also want to take the Hamilton County prosecutor's race, and they want to keep the sheriff's office. And so there's a lot of races that they believe that they can prevail on.
So obviously one of the reasons that this is interesting is because the GOP has basically just had this county to themselves for most of my lifetime. And the GOP is not going to take this lying down. What do you expect them to do?
They are really emphasizing the experience of their candidates. They're running veteran candidates. They're running people that names that this county is going to recognize. First and foremost is Joe Deters, their candidate for prosecutor. He's been prosecutor for 4 terms now. He's running for a 5th term. They believe that people like the kind of law and order, tough on crime brand that Joe has built. And so they believe that's a major, major asset. They're not under any illusion that race won't be close. He faces former municipal court judge Fanon Rucker, who is kind of well known in the community in his own respect. He ran against Deters in 2004, so this is a rematch. Another candidate to kind of keep an eye on is Charlie Winburn. He's a former city council member. He's well known. And he's African American, and he has done a lot of work trying to persuade African American Democrats to cast a ballot for him in the treasurer's race against Jill Schiller, who ran for Congress 2 years ago. So, he believes that he can reach out. He's got a list of pro-life Democrats. He's got a list of African American Republicans. He believes that he can close that gap and win that race if he does the proper outreach.
Well, it's fascinating stuff, and it's a great story that you've got on the cover of our weekly edition this week. And this is all going to be solved one way or the other in the next, 50 days, so 45 days. So we'll hang on tight and see what happens.
Thank you to Rob and Chris for that incredibly important story. Well, many people will be voting by mail this year. Ohioans have requested almost 1.4 million absentee ballots so far. That's almost 3 times as many as at this point in 2016. But the state will not be paying for postage, so you can return those ballots free of charge. Secretary of State Frank LaRose proposed using money from a fund his office controls to cover the cost. But in a party line vote, the Ohio Controlling Board denied the request this week. The board says it's too close to the election and Ohioans can still vote in person. LaRose calls it a missed opportunity.
I think close to 20 states are providing postage paid as well, because what it incentivizes is it incentivizes getting the ballots back quickly. It doesn't have any impact in a partisan way. It doesn't benefit the Republicans. It doesn't benefit the Democrats. What it does do is benefit voters as an added convenience, and it benefits our boards of elections by getting those ballots back in the mail very quickly.
The state covered the cost of postage during the primary. Kentuckians are getting an hour back at the bar. Many folks excited about this. Last call is now 11 o'clock and closing time is at midnight. Governor Andy Beshear says it's so people can stay at a bar or restaurant to watch sports like the NBA playoffs or the NFL. Last call had been 10 o'clock for the last month. No such luck for those of you in Ohio. The 10 p.m. rule is still in effect. A new law in Ohio protects schools and businesses from coronavirus-related lawsuits. It essentially says schools, essential businesses, churches, and healthcare facilities cannot be held responsible for someone getting the coronavirus. That protection is in place until September.
This will give, in my opinion, give businesses the certainty that they need, schools the certainty that they need, and higher education institutions to know that they can go back to work and do so safely and not have to worry about years and years of frivolous litigations.
And to clarify, it's good until next September. So some school superintendents say that's why they waited to bring students back to school. Lawyers recommended they stay closed until they were protected. Ultimate Air is grounding flights until next year. It comes just a couple months after restarting flights to Atlanta and Cleveland. The hope was business travel, its specialty, would rebound, and it has not. The company's vice president says the public charter carrier is averaging single-digit customers. The last flight to Cleveland will be Tuesday and Atlanta 2 days later. The nation's ongoing conversation about race is fueling growth for a local risk management consulting firm now fully owned by 2 black men. The co-founders of Riskversity bought out the remaining ownership stake in their company last year. It was so the downtown consulting firm could be certified minority-owned company. Since then, they've grown by 50%. President Lawrence Jones says the protests over racial equality are a big reason why.
We're selling the best practices and identification models to then help our clients in whatever facet that they're working in. So it could be from a human capital standpoint. It could be supply chain. It could be cybersecurity. Right now, with diversity, equity, and inclusion being the kind of one of the key focuses on racial equity, that's been a driver for us in our employment practices group, or JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion training, to help those companies on their journey to be more racially equitable.
And soon we'll know just how much of an impact black-owned businesses have on our region, and we'll have a comprehensive database to seek them out. The African American Chamber of Commerce and the University of Cincinnati are teaming up on the project. The UC Economics Center has been collecting data for about a month from more than 400 businesses in various industries.
This database and the research following should help us be able to really understand the value of Black-owned businesses in our region.
We're the first African-American Chamber of Commerce to attempt to collect this type of data, but I also believe that Cincinnati will be the first market area in the country to have this type of comprehensive, targeted, accurate data.
And a former firehouse in Westwood is now open, and the place on the west side to get a gourmet burger. Nation Kitchen and Bar is serving from its carryout window in Westwood. The burger restaurant is now part of a blooming business district. Hickory Walled bought the old Engine 35 house from the city, and they are still working on the indoor dining room and bar that will open in a few weeks with limited capacity. The one thing they're promising, some items on the menu that are west side specific. Coming up next on First Financial Biz Beat, we'll take you inside the new FC Cincinnati Stadium and show you the public edition you'll be able to use outside game days. Frazier's been doing two things for as long as he can remember: playing football and building homes. The Holmes and UC grad followed in his father's footsteps on the football field, playing linebacker in the NFL. And then when that was over, he did it again by diving into the home building business. He says he's been hanging cabinets since he was 10 years old. Well, now he designs and builds entire houses for the company he founded, Frazier Homes.
We have the ability to create anything you can imagine. And we're very flexible. A lot of builders are rigid because it takes time and coordination to go outside of the norm. But with Frazier Homes, that's what we do. We go outside of the norm. I've never built a house twice, never.
Frazier was the first black home builder in Homeorama back in 2018, and he's taking part again this year. We're just 6 months from the debut of FC Cincinnati's new stadium in the West End. And this week, we got a peek at the progress. One of the two new scoreboards is the widest at any soccer-specific stadium in the country. Another highlight, a community beer garden that can be used on non-game days. Seats will be going in soon, and once finished in March, it will hold 26,000 fans.
The fan experience, the views from the seats, the access to food and beverage, all of the intangibles is going to make this an unbelievable fan opportunity.
Fans can begin reserving those tickets now. And just down Central Avenue, the Bengals Stadium could be getting some upgrades. Hamilton County and the Bengals hired an LA architecture firm to look at possible upgrades to Paul Brown Stadium. The firm will look at the stadium's condition and provide recommendations on anything that needs to be repaired or replaced. You can expect interest rates to stay pretty low for some time. The Federal Reserve anticipates leaving rates near zero until at least 2023. The major change the Fed is going through is one of the topics First Financial's Kirk Copenhaver talks about with Courier publisher Jamie Smith.
Thank you, Kyla. And Kirk, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Can you tell us what's new in the market?
Last time we were on, we mentioned that the Fab Five, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, and Google, were becoming a risk to the market as they accounted for about a quarter of the S&P 500. Individually, those stocks were up 20, 40, even 80% apiece. This strength really pushed the market up 11% through early September, through September 2nd. But if you took those five stocks out, the market really would have been about flat. The past couple of weeks, though, the Fab Five, they've all corrected a little bit, and that performance gap has actually closed some. So whether or not this trend continues will be something to watch as 2020 winds down.
Okay. In your recent commentary, you talked about how the Federal Reserve is in the midst of a fairly major change. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, since the late 1970s, the Fed has really had a dual mandate of full employment and price stability. Because of this, the relationship between unemployment and inflation became super important for the Fed's decision-making. And something called the Phillips curve became a critical input in that decision-making process. Now, according to the Phillips curve, low unemployment indicates less slack in the labor market, which leads to higher wages and higher inflation. On the flip side, you get higher employment. That means more slack in the labor market, and that's less competition for available workers. That'll lead to less pressure on wages and inflation. Now, remember, prior to COVID, unemployment had been falling for years while the inflation really stayed low. And that basically signaled a breakdown in the Phillips curve. So in late August, Fed Chair Jerome Powell changed the Fed's employment goal from full employment to maximum employment. Now, while this may not sound like a big change, this means that the Fed won't look to unemployment rate as a signal for when to raise benchmark interest rates anymore. The Fed also said they'll now focus on an average inflation rate. So since inflation has been running below 2% per year for a while now, in order for that average inflation rate to get above that standard 2% target, it'll have to run hotter than that for quite some time. So what this means for us is that we're getting positioned for what we're calling a reflation reset.
Okay. I know now you're going to tell us what's a reflation reset.
Well, to us, there's several factors out there that we believe have set us up for a period of rising inflation. You've got booming twin deficits, both on the budget and the trade, and then for the United States, and also a weaker U.S. dollar. Money growth has been explosive. Trade tariffs and deglobalization, that could both lead to higher input costs. And then you've got this Fed shift to an average inflation target instead of kind of a set number. So you combine all these factors with the potential for rising global GDP growth, we think we see a setup where inflation beneficiaries should do well. As a result, we've kind of begun to increase allocations to international markets, which should benefit from that weaker dollar, increase our allocation of real assets like commodities that benefit from higher inflation, and also cyclical commodity-oriented sectors like industrials, energy, and basic materials.
Great. But now more than ever, we need you guys keeping us informed of not only the market, but just all the conditions out there. We thank you for coming on, and we hope to see you again in a week or so.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Kyla, back to you.
All right, thank you, Jamie and Kirk. Well, still to come on the First Financial Biz Beat, an important dialogue in our community that could be sparked by a new exhibition. A free art exhibition featuring 10 local Black artists is coming to the Cincinnati Art Museum. Black and Brown Faces will focus on the facial expressions of people of color as it relates to the extremes of 2020. The team behind this art experience is hoping the artwork will lead to a community dialogue.
We need you to leave uplifted. We need you to leave, acknowledging what has taken place, but most importantly, focusing on the path forward, how we can continue to connect and communicate with one another, to learn about what we've been through and discuss how we can move forward from this.
Black and Brown Faces is presented by Palooza Noir, an organization dedicated to empowering Black professionals in the Midwest. The exhibit opens October 23rd. It will be at the Art Museum through early January, and again, it is free to everyone. A new book is all about the power of her. It's full of stories about powerful women who helped shape Greater Cincinnati. Kathy Merchant, the former president and CEO of the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, edited the book, and she talked about the project with Courier Market Engagement Director Kelly Snyder.
Thanks, Kyla. Kathy, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kelly.
So with ArtsWave, you've just published a new book, Imagineers, Impresarios, Inventors, Cincinnati's Arts and the Power of Her. Tell us why this project was important for you and our community.
Well, not to be selfish, but I'll start with me. For me, this book was really what I call my trifecta. I love the arts, I love philanthropy, and I love writing. So to be able to work on this book truly was a privilege for me, and I'm grateful to ArtsWave for that. But for our community, 2020, despite all of its challenges, is meant to be a full-on celebration of women's suffrage and the passage of the 19th Amendment. And while women in the arts don't have precisely to do with that subject, it was an opportunity to shine a spotlight on women leaders during that period of time. We also wanted to show that, as we always like to say in Cincinnati, we fight above our weight in the arts, and it turns out that it's kind of true. We have a couple of data points to prove that, which is always good. And finally, that women are often overlooked when stories are told about the arts, especially some of the older arts organizations in the European tradition. So those were all super reasons to do this book as part of the Power of Her 18-month initiative.
Great. So from a business perspective, what can we learn from the women featured in this book?
I would say entrepreneurship is the headline. There are, for example, two women in the book, Maria Storer, who founded Rookwood, and Mary Louise McLaughlin, who discovered a methodology that was used by Maria Storer. So the two of them were like competitors and then collaborators. And everyone knows Rookwood, even if they don't know it's from Cincinnati. And there are actually two books that are written about these women, if anybody wants to understand that more deeply, by women in Cincinnati. So this is a really super one example of entrepreneurship. The women in the book have produced it. They've started companies or organizations. They're CEOs, and they have made great success with limited resources that have to be regenerated every year. They know when to fold, and I'll use that fold in the future sustainability sense. So just recently, two dance companies, Mum Laughed, and Mam Laughed, I said that totally backwards, and the Contemporary Dance Theater have merged so that there's a succession plan, even though it's not the traditional family succession. So there are just tons of examples like that in the book.
That's great. So I hear you found some surprising stories with your research and writing. Can you tell me a few?
Sure. I think the most important aha was when we were trying to put together the structure of the book and thinking, chronology is kind of boring, so let's find another avenue. And realizing with a major aha that at that time we had 35, now 34 with the merger, arts organizations founded from 1854 to 2017, and they are all still in business. So the long-term sustainability and the foundation for that was a wonderful surprise and well worth celebrating. The second was that it really is the tip of the iceberg. We had to battle to get the number of women down to this number. We intended to start with 100. We've ended up mentioning and profiling nearly 200 women, and that is just the beginning. Supposedly there could be another book. And then finally, the whole creation of art and arts organizations in our community has really been a flywheel. So you can see in each generation that the rate of development has almost doubled. For example, there were 9 new organizations started just in the 21st century alone, and that was, in the first 15 or so years. So anyway, it's an exciting moment for Cincinnati. It's something that we should be super proud of. And again, I'm grateful that I had the chance to do this book.
Good. Well, thanks again for being here. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Kelly. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, ladies, for that interview. You can get the book from the ArtsWave website or at Joseph Beth. All the proceeds will go to ArtsWave. Thank you so much for joining us for First Financial Biz Beat. We'll be back right here at the same time next week. I'm Kyla Woods. Have a wonderful and safe weekend.